Welcome back to Yield Today with Dallin Candland. I'm here with Tanya. She is the host of the Sober on Purpose podcast. She helps recovering families with addiction and just so many other different things. And I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. I don't, I want to, I would give it a try. Is it Joya? Joya? How do you?
Joya, you're perfect. So
Okay.
Joya, and
Okay.
I
Wow.
wrote a blog called The Joyous Family, just playing off of that.
Wow. I'm so impressed with myself. I don't know. Like I was like,
Well done,
I
Nathan.
just went for it. I just went for it. I was like, but that's beautiful. I love that. I love that so much actually. Wow. Yeah. Where does that come
Well,
from?
Dalen, thank you. It's Italian. It's Italian. So I've got all kinds of vowels in there and one consonant. You know, if I found somebody with a full consonant name like Eastern Bloc countries, we can make a sentence. That's what I always say. And thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast. I've been listening to it. Your thought process is fantastic, and that's why I really wanted to work with you. And yielding. I mean, what a difficult concept. Surrender, yield.
It's hard and it's something I'm learning a lot more, and it's such a deeper thing than just like a one-time thing. And I realized that it's a sometimes it's like a full body, full thought kind of endeavor. It's not like a in part kind of thing. God's like, give me all of this, not just part of this. And there was times in college at different points, or even in other, any difficult part of my life, a lot of times it was I wasn't giving him the whole. I didn't think I was good enough to give him everything, or felt like there was things I needed to hold on to myself, et cetera, et cetera. But, I just had the thought before we jumped on, Tanya, that, there's not like, okay, I'm going to go to God and get his help. It's like, God is ready to help you right now. There's like this amazing quote that's like, the distance between you and God is the distance between your knees and the floor.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Well, before, behind, and beside, right? All the time. And that's where I have learned inaction is action because I want to take action. I want to fix it. I can handle it. Let's make it happen. And oftentimes I end up screwing it up for myself, for my relationships, not really following when he's saying, okay, child, rest. Just rest. I got this. The surrender is harder work for me than the doing.
For sure. Yeah, I think for me it's really hard to slow down, but I realize that if I don't slow down, it's possible for like all of these thoughts to just sort of go in completely different directions. And then with my beautiful ADHD, I'm trying to like track all of them down, and then I feel overwhelmed pretty quickly.
Yes.
And I'm like, holy, this happened like out of nowhere, and all of a sudden in this craziness, I remember like this promise I made to this person like a year ago, that that person disappeared and I didn't get to keep the promise. And I'm like, oh boy. And it's like, it gets really heavy really quickly.
It does. Well, and so you and I have something in common. Late in life ADHD, understanding of all of that. And to look at the gift of being able, not only do we see outside of the box, we don't even see the box. It doesn't even exist because if it did, it could contain some things. But it's so magnificent to be able to go, okay, I can draw from this area and that area and this area and that area and piece it all together because I don't have to see it in this fashion like other people do. And that I think is God's gift. Instead of looking at it as something that to be dealt with, medicated, or those types of things. And I have a son who has the diagnosis as well. And the person who diagnosed him said, look, your brain is like driving a Ferrari. Once you figure out how to drive it, it's magnificent. And that's the phrase I keep repeating to myself when I can't find a link or an email or something like that. I keep repeating that. It's like driving a Ferrari. You just need to get it into gear. And God has given you this to learn how to drive.
God has given you the Ferrari to learn how to drive. I love that. Yeah, like before we jumped on, Tanya, I just had this crazy stream of consciousness, and I like wrote this poem, and then like something I wrote in that poem triggered another poem, and I wrote like three or four of these deep poems in like, I don't know, like 2 hours. And for me, it was very therapeutic, but I was like, this probably wouldn't have been able to happen if I wasn't able to just keep track of all these different thoughts at once. But it does take a immense amount of focus, sort of like with the Ferrari. If it's, I think of like a race car driver, like literally like going around these turns, like how in the world is he doing that? Like it kind of looks like maybe you could do that, but if you were really behind the wheel, you realize, holy cow, there's a lot of power here. And those turns they don't get much easier. There needs to be like compassion around those turns. There needs to be courage around those turns. There needs to be consideration around those turns because those turns are always going to kind of be there.
Yes. And that's what I talk about in helping families is oftentimes the person who is not the one that they call the addict, and we're moving away from those terms, but not the one that the focus is on, has been doing everything for everybody, and they have no more compassion for the person who is using, and they have no compassion for themselves. They're just in such survival mode. So it'd be like you and I getting in a race car. We're like, we're going to survive. And that's where, in taking the focus off of the addict and putting it more as this is something that's also in the environment, and everybody has the opportunity to change. Everybody is an expert on their own life. It puts you back in the driver's seat. If we're going to continue with car analogies, it puts you back in the driver's seat so that you're like, wait, I have needs. I need to sit down and journal. I need to go and exercise. I need to do this. I cannot over focus on this other person who, believe me, doesn't want it in the first place 99% of the time.
Yeah, I love analogies so much. So I totally love, we can go around and around with the analogy. It's beautiful how we can take that time to listen to somebody when they are having that rough time and help them to slow down and help them to be reassured. And that is something I've had on my mind for I don't even know how long. Maybe it's a thought God put in me is that my future wife is going to have to be really patient with me. And I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 20, but
Uh-huh.
just like with different things I've learned about myself and things I've felt and these deep feelings, I knew like patience was going to be a really big part of it because sometimes I feel these things and I don't really know how to explain them. And when I try to explain them, it's like sometimes people don't understand or they take it the wrong way, etc. And it's like that doesn't really help me. And so yeah, patience is a key part of the equation.
Well, and what we're born with basic needs. There's just no denying them. We need to feel loved. We need to feel cared about. We need to feel connected. And so Gabor Mate he's a doctor and a clinician in this area who has said the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. It's connection. So when you know yourself well, you can say, this is the kind of connection that works for me. Which, when you're talking about, I believe, this is my belief, the biggest choice that we get to make is not where we work, where we go to school, all these, to how we spend our money. It's the person we choose to partner with for the rest of our lives. And that choice influences everything else that's going on. So if the opposite of addiction is connection, how do you begin to build that connection? Stop going to, substances or work or other areas to build that connection. But where's the first connection? The first connection is with God. So if your relationship is built on just the two of you, you have a two-legged stool that doesn't work very well. If it's built with you and God and the alignment is here first, then you're not going to need all these outside things. It's not that they can't encroach on you, but that's the source. That's the place to go. And so making that choice, man, that's how I'm teaching my sons is, if you want a woman who looks like this, what kind of man do you need to be to attract her? What kind of character do you need to have to support that relationship?
Yeah, yeah, that's key. Those are important questions to ask yourself because ideas will come to mind. And when you work on those things, then, more things will come. So I'm curious, Tanya, how have you learned about like having God be a crucial part of the connection process, like with you and your spouse and with any of these things, your work, etc.?
It's a great question. It was hard one, really hard one. So I would have liked life to be a lot easier. I would have liked, not to have experienced my own relationship addiction, not to have dealt with my husband's addiction, not to, do all these things. But what I found was as I was moving through life and things kept buffeting me, things are coming on the windshield of my life and they weren't going away, right? So I couldn't walk to my husband and go, I need you to fill me. I need you to be my savior. I need you to take care of all these things. That wasn't, I tried, honestly, I tried, but he's not capable of that. If we put that on any human, he's not capable of it. We have to keep going to the source. So as I began to get in Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian recovery program, Al-Anon, AA, all these programs, and learn this work, I realized that the people who have been through the humps, the bumps, the changing the tires, the dents in the hood, and all those things, those are authentic people. Those are folks that are saying, it's hard, but it's worth it. And that's what I have. I have a shirt that says, marriage is hard, and hard is crossed out, and it says worth it at the bottom. Because we get fed with this image, the Hollywood image of, oh, there's this romantic courtship and a lead up, and you get married, everything's okay, roses and unicorns and rainbows and all that stuff. What Hollywood rarely talks about, but it experiences, is divorce, infidelity, addiction, all these other things that take place the next 50 to 70 years. In the lives of the actors, we see that. But that's certainly not what they're putting on the screen. And I mean, I hate to bring real pop culture into it. A good example is the Barbie movie. If you went to see the Barbie movie, not completely in agreement with it, but man, it is not what you think it would be. And it breaks down a lot of that mythology. And it even talks about how we have set up our younger generation with body dysmorphism, with these thoughts of everything's going to be okay if I just make enough money, or if I just follow the rules, or if I act right. And I'm here to tell you, sitting kind of halfway through it, it's not. Where it's all right is when you take it to God and you say, I know that you're going to work this for my good. I know that you have a lesson plan in here. I may not like it, but I know that I may not like it at all, but I know that it's in here. And I'm going to do as David did. I'm going to sit and wait until you give me the next step.
Yeah, on my run, I listen a little bit to Thomas Frank's fantastic book, 10 Steps to Earning Awesome Grades. And it's a book, I mean, I'm out of college, but I love the book, and I believe in getting new things from books that are really good that I've liked before. And he talked about like taking good notes and like how you need to pay attention in class. And when I heard that on my run, I was thinking of my current classroom of life and all my struggles and all of my learnings that I'm having right now. It's like you need to take deep notes because these are going to help you for the later tests. Like that's literally how it is. It's like
Yeah.
this will literally help you. And I have had times over the last month where I have gone back to deep notes, poetry, things that God gave me. And then when the test came, I was like, oh, look, all the answers are kind of here. And you gave me everything and you told me this was coming. And so I was able to, do what I could through it. And I think it's really powerful when we let God be our, like, lead us through that experience, because He's always going to lead us to, like, those championships and championship moments, things that lead to championships, things that lead to that great growth that we want, because he wants the very, very best for us on a level we don't understand.
Absolutely. And And if we can think that God wants the very best for us. And I was reading some Brene Brown. She 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 posited she was really upset one day. She said, "I don't think everybody's doing the best they can. I just don't think they are." So her husband is off in her sounding board, and she goes to him and she says, "Steve, do you think everybody's doing the best they can?" Now he's a pediatrician, so he sees people at the worst and the best and all that. He said, "Honestly, I don't know, but it helps me to believe that they are doing the best they can." And when I come to God and I'm like, oh, I goofed this one up again, I yelled at my kids, or I didn't produce this at a deadline, or those types of things, He says, I know. You're doing the best you can. We're not finished. We're still working on this. So these notes that you're taking for this life test, hang on to them. It's going to keep happening. And my 16-year-old said to me just the other day, I was fussing about some technical computer issue I was having. I couldn't get it right. I'm like, why am I stuck here? And he said, Mom, you're doing the best you can. You need to start trusting that God's got this and going to take care of it. That's from a 16-year-old who knows better than I do, because I think we get these blinders on and we see here, and I've got to fix it, I've got to control it, I've got to make it happen, when really these blinders don't exist. We're in this beautiful universe that God has said, I'm here with you. I'm going to work with you. I'm putting these desires in your heart. Come and see me. Come knock on the door. I'm going to open it.
Yeah, it's so beautiful how, because for me, as I've addressed my struggles with like pornography that I had back in the day, I've learned that it's not enough just to not engage with it. There has to be a complete turning. There has to be a complete, okay. For me, it was, okay, I've decided I'm going to be on the road to endless virtue and nobody is going to say anything otherwise. And I'm just going to stay on that. And people can say I'm nuts to be going as deep as I can and trying to understand God's love better. But it's like, there has to be that, because I've already tried like this, like sort of wishy-washy, be here and there. But it's like, I love fighting. So I want to fight for God's side. I want to understand everything he wants me to say. And that's going to be in the scriptures. That's going to be in all these other things. And yeah, it's interesting. Tell me a little bit, Tanya, what you share with people about being an active participant in their recovery and not just trying to survive it.
Absolutely. So you talked about it, fighting the right fight. So making sure that if the opposite of addiction is connection, not sobriety, how are you maintaining connection? How are you moving things so that they are going right instead of focused on everything that is wrong? And when you focus on what's going right, more of the right will appear. And it may be really minor things, like today my loved one got out of bed, showered, and came and ate some food. That is going right. It's really minor. Or it could be some major things. They got out of bed, showered, went to their job interview, and got a job. That's awesome. Now, if they come home and you say, well, your room's still a mess, and yeah, you haven't mowed the lawn, and you haven't done this, you're not moving towards making things go right. You're fighting the person instead of the problem. And when you're looking at this, also, you can look at how you are the expert in your family situation and you're the expert on your life. So what is it that you need to change, and how are you going to set boundaries around that? And I'm going to clarify this real quick is, Dallin, I can't set boundaries for you. I can only set boundaries for me. And I had a real incident when my husband was still active. I was staying up at night. I was calling around, making sure he got up okay. I was doing, all these crazy behaviors, and I had young kids at home. I needed to be able to get up with them in the morning. So I went to my Al-Anon group. I told them the whole story, and they said, oh, honey, stop. There's no way you're going to go get a 200-pound man, get him home, get him where you need him to be. That's your illness right there. That's your controllingness right there. Do what's good for you. What's good for me was to go to bed at a reasonable hour, get up with my children at the very early hour, and let him manage himself. The more I managed him, can you imagine what he did? The more I managed him, the more he ran the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really looking at yourself, saying, these are the boundaries I can set and I can control. I can't control what other people do, but I can do things that nurture myself and that put me in a more positive place. So when he is home for dinner, I can say, hey, how was your day? It was great to have you here, instead of going, you haven't been home for dinner for 4 nights and I can't believe you're here now. And you know what? You should just take your dinner and go to the TV because I don't want to see you. You're not helping things go right at that point. What I am not saying is ugly language, verbal abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse. If you need to separate for a while, there is provision in the Bible even for that. If you need to draw boundaries and say, I can't have dinner with you when you're like this, so I'm going to go and eat someplace else, then do that. But these are things that you can do to change that. And I really, your vulnerability in bringing up the porn addiction is something that is, hey, it's really out there, and because we have these now, it's just so much more available than it's ever been, and especially for young men. And we normalize it. And we say, oh, this is just what young men do. Boys will be boys, not a big deal. If connection is what relationship is about, the porn leaves you with an object versus a real human connection. And the human connection, admittedly, is harder to connect over there. So looking at that, am I connecting with the it, or am I connecting with the thou, the human over here? And I think there's a really good book on that by Mo Isom called, I think I'll get it right, Sex, Jesus, and the Conversation the Church Forgot. It's an excellent book about how she chose, and she self-labels as a porn addict, so you've got a woman, not a man, how she chose to overcome that and work through into a healthy relationship. And it's all about connection and about her setting her own boundaries and wanting what you want, a fully virtuous life where she could stand in her own integrity, because we're all going to be called to stand at some point, right?
Yeah, yeah. Compassion can never equal distraction. And I can think of several times like standing up to somebody that was trying to show me it and like pushing them down, it was difficult, and be like, hey, no. And then there's like those few episodes where you do like stick around or fall into it. And the brain is really good. My brain is really good at diving deep into whatever it wants to dive deep into. And so if it wants to dive deep into that, that all of a sudden expands to where it becomes almost immeasurable. And it feels like I've spent my entire life looking at things I shouldn't. And that is could not be the case. That's very untrue. But I think the important thing is to acknowledge and to give yourself grace, and to also be honest at everything that has occurred, and reminding yourself that tomorrow is a new day. I am 150 days clean, I guess, if you want to call it that. But for me, it's like, I think it's like I've made it bigger. Like, that's thought poison, that's everything. Because for me, it's like, if it's not edifying me, it's darkness, it's not useful. I think everybody's trying to seek connection. Some people do it a poor way and they don't know what they're doing. For me, I look at it and I know God has given me an immense amount of light. And so whenever I look for light in darkness, that's only going to hurt me. And when it comes to opening up to people, when I don't share my light or share that it's flickering, I only burn myself later. And I've seen that many, many times, even if it wasn't running into something I didn't want to run into. But that is a big part of it. I think the ADHD is a big part of it for me, but I'm glad that things worked out however they worked out. Because I think I've said this a couple times. If I had been diagnosed at like 8 or 9, who knows what would have happened? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Instead, I just flew under the radar and
Yeah.
did track and stuff that hid all my symptoms, and I was able to get the very best of it. The very, very best of it, and all these grades went through the roof. And I'm trying to reflect that same pattern. But yeah, it's humbling. I love this conversation that you open up for people, that you step into their conversations, Tanya. It really is so inspiring. I really love that you came on. And is there anything else you would say for somebody that is trying to drive their car of life with peace of mind and to trust God? And then how do we get in contact with you?
So exactly what you said is isolation, going to things that are not going to provide light, and feeling so ashamed that you can't ask for help are what perpetuate any type of addictive behavior. It's when you are stepping away from the things that can help you. And for those loved ones, it's looking at what's going right. So keep acknowledging what's going right. Keep acknowledging that, even if it's tiny, tiny, tiny. So I have a podcast too, as you mentioned in the beginning, Sober on Purpose. I'm TanyaGioia.com. You can find me there. And then I have a Facebook group called Rise Above Addiction. We pray for each other. We do live trainings in there. We make sure that you have the resources you need to turn this ship around, because your main source is God. And then God puts people, the term that I like is Jesus with skin on. God puts people around you, and we were talking about this earlier, who feed into your life. And that's my service. That's the gift that I want to give, is that service. And join the Facebook group, schedule a call, let's talk some more. The thinking around addiction and behaviors around addiction is rapidly changing, and it is really worth checking into, because every person, 46% of us, it's really 100%, but they don't calculate it right. But every addict affects 5 people intimately. So you probably have someone in your sphere that can be helped by you being more compassionate, you being more connected, you moving toward, hey, this is really going right. So Dallin, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. Love that you're doing the poetry, the deep thoughts, and keep driving that Ferrari. It's a wonderful vehicle, and it will certainly serve you well.
Yeah, literally, I wrote one of the poems I wrote this morning, Tanya, was what is going right, and it literally was like, if you look at what is going right, then things will be better, and all this other stuff. So it's kind of crazy you brought that up, but yeah,
It's a
God is
God
good.
incident, right? It's a God incident.
I believe it for sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya. We'll have links to all your stuff in the show notes, and just love what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.